Well, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Regeneration, Vibrancy and Climate Change Scrutiny Review Board. It's Monday the 29th at 6 o'clock. Have we got any apologies?
Councillor Poulter and Councillor Sanders for apologies.
That's lovely. Late items to be introduced by the chair. I do not have any. Declarations of interest. Anybody have any declarations they wish to make? No? Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of March. Councillor Holmes, you chaired that meeting. Would you like to say they're a true record?
Oh yes, if anyone's got issues or matters arising, I don't know if this members does. So Rawson was.
Yeah, all right. Good. Right, item 5 is executive scrutiny minute extract from the 10th of the 6th. Anybody want to tell us about this? No, we just note it.
I think so.
Okay, we'll note that and move on. So item 6 is transport and roadworks update. Is that right? I'm sorry, I've gone on the wrong page, haven't I? No, that's all right. Item 6, transport and roadworks updates.
That's it.
Who's going to talk to us about that?
Yep.
Nigel.
Thank you. I mean, this is obviously an update from the report brought in April here, where we went through detailed regulatory framework for roadworks, streetworks, etc. As far as an update, I mean, the legislation, the regulations are still the same. There's been no change or increase the levels of the penalty charges. I mean, in terms of the activity of the utilities, there is a bit of a seasonal increase as we move to this time of the year. There is an increase in our own activity as well. If you add up all of the utilities and add up the roadworks content, road maintenance works, they're roughly about 50-50 at this time of year. Obviously, access to the network, traffic declines through the summer period. There's quite a big coordination effort that goes on. In terms of FPNs, Section 74s, they just tend to move around in proportion to the level of activity that's on the network. I have got some reports that have come out of the standard national system. What they don't have is monetary values on them at this stage. That's partly to do with the connection between the finances. Certainly when we're looking at Section 74s, which are the overstay charges, then the calculation of that is formulated as we go through the challenge process. If you remember from the previous report, for the worst sort of overstay on the busy sort of road, £5,000 a day. But even in those circumstances, if the overstay has been generated by 5 items or less being left on the street, then it's £100. So, you know, there's quite a massive differential. And as you guess, you know, as we go through the negotiation process, unless they're accepted straight up front, because it's a blatant breach, then the negotiation process can sometimes be well protracted. You know, you're looking at sort of 16, 18 months is not unusual. 6 months is probably quick. And it's so we're talking about fixed penalties. So Section 74 is about overstays. And then FPNs are working in breach of a permit condition. So somebody might have said, well, we're doing this, and we've said, okay, but all times and don't, so breach it. But that's fixed costs as well, as we pointed out previously. Or if someone works without obtaining a permit, and again, that's a breach with an FPN and fixed costs. So, I mean, that's the update as far as how activity structured. I mean, I don't know if you want to go into any more detail about it. I'm quite happy to.
Yeah, Councillor Holmes.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's something which we'd like to continue to discuss. I mean, I've had conversations with you about various issues, and I'm sure we've got examples in all of our wards. Before I forget, I think it would be useful to hear a little bit more report brought to the committee on FPNs. So what does that stand for?
Fixed penalty.
Just so obviously people know, you talk about
fixed penalty notice.
So fixed penalty notices and overstay fines as well. It'd be interesting to know in the last financial year or whatever period's relevant as to how many we've actually levied, or whatever the word is, on contractors and utility companies, just to get an idea. Shall I pause there for you? Yeah.
No,
And then that's interesting, I think, to know a little bit more about. It'll give us an overview of how active or proactive the council is, and how good or otherwise the utility companies and contractors are across the city. Two recent examples in my own ward, Micklöver. One was seemingly a completely unscheduled, not emergency repair. It was a cover to, I believe it was Severn Trent or water cover, and the road was actually closed. It wasn't even a minor sort of temporary lights that actually closed one of the main routes through Micklöver with no forewarning. We spoke to the council; they didn't know anything about it. It didn't appear in the TROs. It didn't appear on the roadworks map.
Yeah.
It was a complete mystery, and they just turned up and closed the road. I don't think that's acceptable, and I would hope that there is some comeback for when that occurs. If the council could be confident that it wasn't emergency works, but even if it was, they should really be informed.
Yeah.
And secondly, there's one that's currently ongoing at the moment. It's a bit of major works in terms of electrical installations across, I'd say, at least half, if not maybe 70% of Station Road, which goes straight through Micklöver from the village end right to the top to Radbourne Lane. It started at a really busy point at the moment, and it's three-way lights currently. It's going to move its way up the road. Now, we were told 7 days a week working. Well, they haven't worked this weekend, the first weekend. We weren't told in advance. It didn't appear in the TRO lists. We had to proactively, as in councillors, proactively talk to the lead contractor to have a dialogue about the overview of the work, more detail, so we could pass that confidently on to residents.
Yeah.
And really, it was a case of a plea in terms of those kind of works, where again, we need really, if we can, proactive work between councillors, the officers, and the utility company and contractors that are doing those kind of works when they're major, to have a heads up so we can actually work together. And then, as I'll show up in a second, and then finally, enabling us to have that dialogue and that communication as that work progresses over a number of weeks as well. It's again, we're having to really chase people for some issues that have occurred very early on in this particular piece of work. So the kind of issues we're experiencing as ward councillors, and it's really we're looking to officers to help us in managing that and have some kind of liaison so that the council are also being proactive and enable us to be proactive by working with us on all of these schemes as they come through.
And from our previous discussions, we've given you some examples about how working with local members is really helpful, actually, because you tend to have the networks at the local level, which is actually helpful for the utility companies as well. It's about forging good relations to get some difficult schemes done, and that I think you do have a role in that. So, as we've said, certainly in terms of major works, our intention is to start trying to put together again a list of major works that we know are up and coming, probably on a fortnightly basis, because months too long, weeks too short, go down the middle. What we want to do though is put that onto based on the website where it can be easily found rather than be sending it out. Maybe Werner were talking about a role for AI at some point, which could actually go and mine out this data and actually create like a subsidiary data set that maybe people can look for the works that they want on the roads that they want to look for. So we could probably try and do something around that. In the meantime, let's just have a look at the major works. I think emergency works are a really difficult one because the chambers can be during the burst or a breakage or an outage, and depending when those works start, there is that time frame where they can inform us after the event, and then they've got a reasonable period before the actual permit period starts. So you can get quite prolonged works out of what looks like a very small piece of work. And of course, if they've gone into action the work, and it's about sort of protecting their asset, then the TRO will come after the events as well. So it's kind of, we can only coordinate what we know about at the right time is what I'm trying to get to. But I think particularly around planned work, and that should be as much about our roadworks as it is about utility works, because they're all disruptive. They're achieving different purposes, but they're all disruptive. So I think we'll try and put that together. We'll try and formulate some sort of fledgling version of it. If it's not quite right, let us know. We'll change it. We'll try and get the information together as best as we know it. Because things change, there'll always be something that's not on it. There'll always be something that happens that you think that should have been on the list, but there'll be a reason why it's not been on either. It's emergency work and it comes after the publication. It doesn't meet the categories, but it's actually disruptive when it hits your walls. So minor work, 3 days can be quite disruptive. In some ways, minor works and emergency works are hardest to deal with and have more of an impact than well-planned works. Just going to the point about how many FPNs, it's FPNs issued last year is around about 46. And Section 74 overstays is I haven't got an exact number, but it's just over 60, so about 63, 64. So, and if you remember back from the previous session when we went through some of the processing in quite a lot of detail, I wouldn't say those numbers are particularly high, but when you think about all of the ways in which can get an extension, a legitimate extension, so they're overstaying their original time limit. Those numbers are not insignificant, I would say.
I think a couple of things, Chair, if I may. Be interesting to know more detail about that as to which particular utility companies or contractors or works type falls into those particular overstays, or it'd be just interesting to know, is it always that particular utility company or working on behalf of that utility company that causes more of the delays? It'd be interesting to drill down in some of that data.
If you look back at the original report, there's a couple of pages of what was currently outstanding.
Yeah,
you can see the utility on there. I would say that's probably is there such thing as a typical spread? I don't know. You are right though in terms of there are sometimes new contractors that come onto a utility framework. I would say from time to time onto highways frameworks as well, where the behaviour on the ground is just not quite right. There is a bit of a learning curve. We do hear quite often contractors or contract teams turning up and saying, we've never had to do this before. And the pat answer is welcome to Derby.
Yeah.
But there is a fact that we have tried to establish some standards. And again, I'll refer you back to the April report where we said saying that we were subjecting our own works to noticing processes 20 years ago, well before it became accepted or considered to be best practice, because work is work, isn't it? What everybody wants in terms of resilient highway network is a well-maintained network, but it's also trying to get the best out of it. So we don't want unnecessary and avoidable disruption. Never wanted that.
Okay, and finally, Chair, one last thing. I've spoken to you about this as well, Nigel, trying to find ways to actually help the councillors be informed. And I know it's a resource issue, it's a balance. If AI can pull out some of that information, it'd be fantastic. Councillor Ingle, I think must be a year ago now, talked about the map that you can look up. That's very useful. There's the habit of doing that. And also it's very useful to have the TRO emails from officers. So thank you for that too, because you can scan down like planning lists. If you get into a habit of looking at it, you get more informed. But I'm thinking that if officers don't have the resources to necessarily drill down and hold the hand of councillors to a degree on this one, then should we push the process onto the contractor or the utility company to actually proactively engage with councillors, because they may not want to do that and think that it's another hurdle that's going to cause issues. Don't want to talk to pesky councillors because we just cause trouble. Well, my experience is when I've myself and colleagues, when we've proactively engaged with contractors, either reached out to them or they've reached out to us, the whole process is far better. We get an opportunity to have local knowledge and offer, basic advice. They can take it if they like, but we have actually helped provide a far better process by saying, well, actually, if you thought about this, don't do it then because of this. We know that this will happen to avoid that. You get the chance to speak to them and say, look, build a relationship up and say, you ring me, I'll ring you, we'll get this sorted. And it's far better for them and far better for us. So if there's a way to actually potentially, and again, it's about how Derby do things compared to other places. I'm have to do that elsewhere. Well, here we actively encourage you to reach out to councillors, let them know, because sometimes the first time we hear about things is letters to residents. And the resident will scan the letter, say, oh, I didn't know about this. Can you tell me more about it? And it's like, well, thanks for the letter because they hadn't contacted us. So if they do, that's what I think that would be a really good move. Some might not want to do it, but I guarantee that probably 9 times out of 10, if they do it, it'll be a far better process for them. And they may actually find that we give them a lot more support than they think rather than hindrance.
So at the moment, when it comes to when we receive particularly permit application, I mean, again, we've got this slightly strange arrangement where we've got some part of the system is on notice, system is on permits, but particularly on permits, we've got the ability to apply conditions. One of the conditions is about public communication. Then we've also got the ability to make some recommendations as well. So picking up a conversation that we'd had previously about this, we're going to, particularly where it's on permits, we're going to try and recommend they contact the local council and we'll write the local council detail for them. So we can build that into the actual condition of the communication, and we'll try and see if we can do that. On notices, oddly enough, we've got a bit more flexibility in what we can ask for, but less teeth about forcing it. So it's, but we'll start with permits straight up as we go, and we'll see if we can do that. Because I think you're right. I can think of many occasions where local councils have added value, sometimes just by they know the local networks, they know the local area, and certainly officers know it, and we do. Some of the, to be honest, some of the opinion formers, some of the people who actually can make or break the way that these things are landed. And all communities have got those things, and it could be about a community hub or a particular shop or the various examples, or there are just areas of the city that geographically are difficult to get in and out of if one route is lost. So how is that negotiated? And you think about things like Mackworth, Bover's another one to some extent. Geographically, they all rely on a sort of very tight system of roads, and each one of them can be isolated very easily. So,
and Chelsea as well.
Yeah, Chadderston to some degree as well. Yeah,
Chelsea's better now. We've got the T12 relief.
Well, yeah.
Yes,
better.
But the eastern side of Chadderston can become a bit of an island very easily, can't it? It's not a massive amount of ways in and out of some of that development.
We haven't gone Snellsmore Lane, Chadderston catches a cold. My biggest bugbear still is when people have come in and done emergency works, and we all understand that emergency works, things break. We all understand that. The one that annoys me more than anything is when the job's done, you have to wait 4 or 5 days to get the temporary traffic lights out, even though the job is completely done. And then if you ring up and complain and say, well, we're still within the permit. Yeah, exactly. Though I appreciate you still within the permit, can you come and take them away because they've been here 5 days longer than they needed to be? Yeah, that's my biggest bugbear, and I noticed that my constituents. Do you want to anything question you have?
I just wanted to make a quick comment that I think that's a really good idea about the website that you mentioned, because often it's not necessarily your own ward, residents in their own ward. Sometimes you're travelling through another ward, right, and you need to know what's going on. So some sort of accessible, particularly for residents, because if I'm contacted about Chelsea Local Labour, I wouldn't have any ideas straight away. And that would be really useful. I think that's a brilliant idea.
There is a website called one.network, and that is that anything that's got a permit, and that tells you also up to 12 months in advance what's coming. So you have a look on that. It's really a very useful tool to have, especially when you're not in your own ward. You can what's that traffic hole be. Anyway,
Not everything appears on there. That's
No,
not.
but
not everything.
The other problem with that, we went through some of that the vagaries and the allowances in the systems mean that not everything's on.
But it's very good.
Yeah, I think quite a large percentage. Right, any more for any more?
Yeah,
Yes,
just to sort of expand a bit further on what you said, Bill, about the permits and over weekends, for example, when the work's done and they're left, and whether there's any way to try and get the permits more accurately aligned with the actual amount of length of time that the work's going to be done.
And I would say from that is I think that when they put a job in, they'll just put a standard job. So they've got to replace that's going to take 10 days. You know, whether it does or not is irrelevant, isn't it? That's what they allocate.
It's a conversation that officers can have and say, if you consider what is it that you're going to do? Typically, this might take 5 days or whatever, and just have a bit of a conversation with them and try and.
So we do challenge it. So, but emergency works have got a maximum time that you can put in for them, but then after that they should turn into something else, whether it's standard or major works, etc., or they're done and dusted. Minor works, they're 3-day duration, but you've got these reasonable periods to stretch it a little bit. Standard works, again, you've got up to a number of days, and then reasonable period. Major works can be, very long in some senses, or they could be fortnight or so. The worst case scenario, particularly with emergency works, is where something goes wrong on a Friday, and the utility company responds to the customer's needs. Customer sorted out. Saturday and Sunday are not classed as working days, so they don't actually come off of the duration time. So if they put in a 3-day duration, clock doesn't start ticking till Monday. So they've actually got until the back end of the week to complete the work that's not done on Friday. And there's not a lot we can do about that, because by the time, if that happens on a Friday, we probably won't get the permit because it's emergency works. We won't get the notification through until no one's monitoring the system, whether that's very late Friday or early Saturday. First thing we know about it is Monday morning. It's already in play. And as you can guess, that work schedule for a week means it's very hard for us to change that work schedule. So it's basically going to run its course out. So I do get the frustration, but some of these things are baked into the way the legislation works. But yeah, we do challenge stuff where, we get a duration for something which comes to us particularly as standard works, and you sort of think, well, the guys who do day to day look at it and think, there's a limit to what we can push here because we're not gas engineers or water engineers. I expect that.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think the frustration also comes in when there's so many different contractors in place. So you have the person that comes and puts the traffic lights up.
Yeah.
Then you have the person that comes and takes the tarmac off.
Yeah.
And the person that comes and digs the hole and exposes what the problem is.
Yeah.
And the person that actually comes and fixes the problem.
Yeah.
And then it reverses order back. And of course, they're all separate companies, separate contractors. The repair might take an hour, but because of all that process that's in, it seems to take.
It's an hour a week.
And you wouldn't mind if you actually saw people there working, but you see them sporadically for a few minutes at a time, then they're gone, and the roads are there for a week, and I get how frustrating that is, and it would be nicer if that could be, if the utility companies could rein that in a bit, because I'm sure it'd do them good to actually, as they, as the engineer gets there, so right, it's going to take me an hour to repair this. Can you get the bloke here in an hour to fill the oil back in? And then when he gets there, it's going to take me an hour to fill it in. Can we get the bloke? And it gets done.
Yeah.
And it gets done in 24 hours as opposed to a week. Yeah. But maybe I'm just hoping for things that aren't possible.
And as I said before, the focus a lot of the time is on securing the asset or responding to the customer needs, and the teeth in terms of asset management, and particularly with the industry regulators around the customers being serviced with minimum downtime, are much stronger than ours we have. And in some ways, you sort of say rightly so, because customers are paying for a service, or if you want it fixed. But the miss of if you like, the uncalculable costs of the travelling public, because it's probably in reality, if you've worked out the economics, it's probably pence for each person, but it's a lot of pences. But of course, there's no single point, so it just bleaches away, doesn't it?
Very well, good description. Any more for any more? Well, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. Right, moving on. Then marketplace.
Update on marketplace.
Thank you. Okay. Who's going to give us that? Amy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just set up the slide deck, so bear with me 1 second.
Gives me time to say thank you to Nigel and for getting our path put in Chellaston. It was open officially on Friday.
Yeah.
And it has gone down a storm. Good. So thank you very much indeed for that. Really appreciate it.
We had to go through protected hedges and trees.
And I've just had a message about somebody's trees actually, so I might need to call on you again.
Yeah, that's it. We've had to dance around the TROs and stuff. But no, I'm pleased it's done.
Yes, it was absolutely brilliant. Very well received. Please.
Thank you. So I have a chance to set up now. So quick introductions. I'm Catherine Williams, Head of Regeneration, and he's here too as Director of City Vibrancy and Growth. And I've just started with this slide really because we want to acknowledge this has been on Scrutiny's work programme for some time, and what we wanted to do this evening was be as comprehensive and direct as we could be in addressing the questions and specific areas of this whole project that Scrutiny wanted to talk about. So the slides that will follow cover these three main areas. The first is talking a little bit about the Council's preferred strategic development partner, Vinci and Ion. That's a joint venture, two separate companies. I'll talk a bit more about who they are and what they do later and what their credentials are, and also the process we've been through and continue to go through to actually appoint them to be our development partner. So that's the first section. I think this board specifically also asked for plans and timeline for the demolition of the assembly rooms and the regeneration of the site. So we'll touch on that. And then finally, associated with that, the capital and revenue financial implications. So hopefully that's what you were hoping and expecting to hear about.
Yeah.
So before I go into that detail, I know over the course of the last few months, whilst this has been on the work programme, the name has changed. It was previously Project Assemble and now we're calling it Marketplace. So just for the avoidance of doubt, I thought it'd be useful just to set a really high level timeline of the journey of this site, if you like, over the last 12 months. So back in January 2023, Derby had the announcement we'd secured £20 million of levelling up funding for a new learning theatre on the assembly room site. We continued obviously to develop the project, develop designs, develop a partnership with the university, and then last summer reached an affordability review where the cost plans were escalating. So we renegotiated with government to allocate that LUF funding to the Guildhall and existing Derby Theatre refurbishment project. So what was called Project Assemble was really talking about the learning theatre on the assembly room site. So
can you just tell me exactly what a learning theatre is for all the people that don't know?
Yeah, of course. So the learning theatre is what Derby Theatre's way of running. Obviously it's owned, it's part of the University of Derby. So what that enables the theatre to do is bring a number of extra benefits and activities on in and around that theatre show provision. So obviously they provide courses for their university students with real life exposure to the theatre world. And they also do a lot of work. So that's one end of the learning spectrum. At the other end, they do a lot of work with the community in terms of learning about culture and experiencing culture and using culture to help the community to explore issues that are important to them, engage, develop their skills, all of that kind of thing. So it's beyond a theatre in the sense of, putting on shows. They produce their own shows, but they also host touring productions as well. So that's what Derby Theatre do already. And the new building was intended to be a showcase and expansion of that work. And for all the reasons that, are been explored previously, that proved not to be deliverable. So in parallel with that journey, if you like, we started the procurement of our development partner throughout the autumn last year, which involved a tender process and using a framework. So that basically gives you a fixed number of companies to go to who've already been selected according to a series of criteria. So saves quite a lot of that initial procurement work. Since we kind of did the evaluation and we decided who we wanted to work with, we've been obviously going through the approval process for that and negotiating an agreement with them, which sets out who's going to be doing what to develop this scheme, who's going to pay for what, etc., and provides them some comfort and certainty to move into the next stage. So that's been ongoing throughout. Sorry, there's an error there. 2024, that should read, not 2023. Those of you who spot that. And then what we're working on at the moment, all of this is geared towards an outline business case. And an outline business case basically provides confidence that a scheme is deliverable. It looks at the financial case. So how's it going to be? What are the costs and how might it be funded? It looks at the economic case, so what are the benefits going to be and how does that prove value for money? And it looks at the strategic case as well. What are the reasons we're doing this? How does this fit into what Derby needs, etc., as well as other things. So that's what we're working on now with Vinci and I on over the rest of this calendar year. So that's just a bit of context really in terms of project assemble, marketplace, developer procurement, how we are. I would say, Chair, I should have said this at the beginning, but there's probably about 10 or 12 slides. So I'd suggest if members want to chip in with questions as we go through, that will probably work best. And then obviously we can wrap up at the end as well. Okay, so in terms of why we're going down this road of appointing a developer partner, we had cabinet approval to procure back in February 2023. And really, this is about having a long-term relationship with a developer that we can work with over a period of time, join up what we do within the city centre on different sites that the council own, make sure that it's coherent and it makes sense in terms of what Derby needs, but also importantly, given the financial constraints of local government, the council and the public sector, this is about really leveraging as best we can the capacity and the expertise that the private sector can bring. And I'll come on to this, but through this process, we've been able to show that the people we're working with have absolutely the right type of experience to tackle the kinds of challenges that we have in Derby. So this is really about that partnership. And then in terms of the scope, the priority is to look at proposals for regenerating the Assembly Room site, what we called cultural heart in the tender documents, but also potentially to progress additional regeneration opportunities as well, through which everybody wins, because the developer obviously has a long-term partnership with us, and they get obviously they achieve more delivery and more development on the back of that, but also we win because we establish that relationship with them, and we benefit from that over time.
It's a similar process today. Well, we've gone out to the market, appointed a development partner who we can work with and shape what they do, and then they deliver a regeneration project.
Yeah, we've almost gone a stage further with this, in that we've taken a slightly different procurement process, and we're looking at a number of sites across the city. And I mean, this I'll say up front, just for copyright reasons, I took this from Centre for Cities, and I won't go through it in detail, but it was really just a bit of a kind of representation of how regeneration works and what the issues are that we're trying to tackle, because we'll hear viability mentioned a lot when people talk about regeneration. And in summary, what that means is it costs an amount of money to deliver a new development, building costs, planning costs, all of those things. There's a value to that development at the end, depending on who your tenant is, what the terms of a lease are, what the value of the building is, and a viability gap emerges when there's a difference between the two. So if the value of what you've developed at the end isn't as much as what it costs to deliver, then you have a viability challenge. And this is just showing really that there's a kind of spectrum of involvement that public and private sector have, depending on the relative risk and reward balance, really. And inevitably, we only get involved where there's market failure as a local authority. Regeneration, obviously planning, consider applications, but we only intervene directly when the market can't deliver. So at the far right of that spectrum, when you can fully finance something from private investment, there's no public funding required. But obviously at the other extreme, if there's no value at all and they'll be taking too much risk that's not palatable for investment, then we have to intervene fully. So I've included that just because it obviously sets a bit of the scene for the kind of relationship that we're having to build through this developer partnership. So in terms of who we've selected, Vinci Group, Vinci UK Development are part of the wider Vinci Group that I'm sure many of you will have heard of, and they come with significant financial strength, and they've got national and global experience of regeneration, and they've partnered up with Ion Property Developments, who bring a very specialist regeneration expertise in locations like Derby, because what we really wanted through this were partners who'd worked in areas like, nowhere's quite like Derby, is it? Nowhere's like our city, but similar challenges, similar issues really. And they've got they're particularly good. They've got really strong relationships with other public sector agencies, for example, combined authorities in other parts of the country where they've worked, Homes England, for example, which are all really, really important when we're looking at delivery. And they've also got with them the professional services team. Obviously, they've got a whole host of specialists that are around them, around like architects, engineers, a range of different kind of professional services to help work this up. And then they obviously come with really good experience and capability as well. I've not listed them all here, but that's available if you want to talk that through. And the other point really to mention at this point is in terms of that agreement I mentioned earlier, where we've set out who's going to be doing what and who's going to be paying for what. Vinci are investing a significant amount up front in developing these proposals. So they have skin in the game. They're committing on that basis. So I think that's really important in terms of that kind of risk share, if you like. They've also said, I think based on discussions here and elsewhere, that they have made an offer for a member briefing on their proposals for the assembly room site. So we can certainly organise that in due course. And I won't go through these in detail, but there's just a couple of examples I've included here of new office development in Blackpool. Obviously, there was a civil service relocation behind that, but the quality of the build and some of the awards it won and the credentials it achieved were really good. And similarly, Ion, the example I've given here is in Wolverhampton. That was, again, a long-term partnership. And they've developed a mixed-use scheme there with transport and office development that is, I guess, similar to the kind of thing we want in Derby.
Councillor Watson, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there was a particular part of the country where Ion worked. Are they mainly West Midlands based? Or?
Ion are mainly northwest, so they're based in Liverpool. So many of the projects they've done are in that region, if you like. But they have obviously delivered Wolverhampton and now in Derby as well. So
can I just dip in there, Jeff, on scheme examples? I've just had a quick look at their website. It would be useful just to clarify at this stage. Derby Theatre staying put.
Yeah.
So that's not obviously on the table anymore. Yeah. And Beckett-Well Arena will be open next year. Yeah. So it's almost zero chance of it being theatre or a venue, we've got the quad, of course, which is in dire need of support in terms of that regeneration of that area. Would it true to be say then that we should be expecting something like a mix of a hotel office workspace and maybe some public ground to support that in the marketplace? Is that pretty much what the public should be expecting this is going to be? I'll put a percentage on it.
Yes, in broadly, yes, and I've got a couple of slides on that I'll to explain what the current mix is that they're looking at and based on their initial work. So
jumped in too soon then. There again. Thank you.
I know that's obviously what everybody's interested in.
Yeah,
as
well,
is what's
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of the assembly rooms demolition itself then, so during last kind of financial year, if you like, during 2023 and 24, the council did do some pre-demolition work, as we call it, and that was really to understand fully the condition of the building and work through providing information ultimately for a demolition contractor. And in addition to that, we also did, for example, we've safely removed and stored the what was known as the Jacobean ceiling within the building as well. So that was a series of works really to get the building as ready as we could for demolition without actually pressing that button. And the other thing, obviously, we announced it was announced earlier this year that we would be demolishing in the autumn. So we've been working with a contractor since then to finalise how that demolition can proceed, what the programme in terms of the timescales will be, and how much what the final cost will be for that. And we have most recently started talking to the businesses neighbouring that site to engage with them and open a conversation to help work through the impacts and implications for them. So that's ongoing. We know there are planning requirements that we need to address, and we've been working on talking to planning about the information they need to enable us to ensure those planning requirements are met. And then, as I say, all of that is working towards the actual demolition to start in autumn this year. I'll pause there because I imagine there might be a few questions.
Yeah, just on the planning requirements, be confident those are going to be able to be met. Because I think at one point they were asking for a fully designed and costed scheme before they'd allow demolition to begin. So I imagine there've been a few challenges there, but you managed to overcome those as the point where you think that you'll be able to go in the autumn.
So in terms of the planning requirements, obviously there is a planning consent for demolition, and that planning consent has a number of conditions attached to it. So we've been looking at, and I think there's 3 or 4 conditions. We've been looking at those conditions, talking to planning, understanding what information they need. Obviously, we can't prejudice any decision by the local planning authority. I have to say that clearly. But we've done as much as we can to understand what the intentions were behind those conditions and what the information is that's required to satisfy those. So I don't know if there's anything else.
No, I mean, I think we're fairly confident, having worked between planning and regeneration, exactly what's required to be submitted that will satisfy those conditions. So I think we're highly confident.
So structural demolition to start in the autumn. So a couple of months. Knowing the planning process, that's quite ambitious.
Quite tight.
Because the conditions are quite significant unless the council proposes to maybe have them amended or removed, but that's something which is in their gift as the applicant. So it would be good to be honest. I'm not saying it's dishonest, but I'm just sceptical about autumn. Anyway,
Late
by the right, okay, probably December. Anyway, by the by, we'll see. The fact is, it needs to move forward as quickly as possible, doesn't it now? But in terms of and again, you're probably going to say it's in the next slide. Estimated cost of demolition currently, any idea? Well, we must have an idea.
I've got a slide.
You've got a slide. And the point on that was that the council proposed to demolish the assembly rooms about 4 years ago. Then the planning officers and subsequently the planning committee placed the conditions on the demolition. So it gave it approval, but as you say, put very significant conditions on, which effectively meant X, Y, and Z needs to be in place before you can proceed. And I know that is going to mean a big increase in cost, and it would be interesting to know what the cost potentially. Well, I could dig it out in old reports, but the cost 4 years ago, I would assume now is significantly less compared to the cost of demolition now. It'd be interesting to know. just for future reference, because when officers and or planning committee make a decision to place a conditions on a site like this, it's very rare that the financial impact of that in terms of how much delay that will impose on a local authority or an applicant moving forward with the plan is probably understated, because I would imagine every month that went by between then and now has added a very significant cost to the demolition of this building. And given the inflationary rises, construction costs and all the rest of it, I think it'll be eye-wateringly different between when it could have been demolished and when it's hopefully going to be demolished this late this year or early into next. Just I think that's fine.
That's fine.
Okay.
So in terms of, to your point earlier, in terms of what the proposals comprise, there's a mix of really a kind of melting pot, if you like, of cultural, creative and commercial uses within a building on the marketplace. Now, the exact mix of uses, who that will be, what that will look like, is all part of the work that Vinci and Ion are doing with us at the moment to prove that concept essentially and get something that can work. What we do know is we want it to be absolutely complementary to the things we already have in Derby, to add value to that, and we need it to work as well in terms of being sustainable, both from a environmental perspective but also a financial perspective as well. We do want to look at remodelling the marketplace. Obviously, the public realm is really important to any placemaking scheme, and Vinci Ion are looking at they've been doing work exploring, talking to investors and operators to explore a 4-star hotel in the mix, because we don't obviously have one of those in the city centre, and office space as well. So that's the mix of uses that they're looking at.
There seems to be some glaring omission there. What's happening to the car parking spaces? We're not going to have a car park there?
So the car park will be demolished with the Assembly Rooms building, and there won't be a replacement car park on that site. So what the council are doing at the moment is looking at a wider car parking strategy for the city.
It's not going to be there, though, is it?
It won't be on the Assembly. There won't be a car park on the Assembly Rooms.
So on this, Chair, I mean, this is something which probably needs further discussion, because at the moment there isn't going to be extra parking in terms of the Beckettwell build. It may happen in the future. There may be options to do that, but potentially then, well, not potentially, we aren't going to get increased parking for the arena, and we aren't going to have parking as part of this regeneration of the marketplace. So that's a significant issue in my view, because it's about revitalising the city as a whole, supporting businesses, supporting the current hotels that we have nearby, as well as the new one. Where is the parking going to be? You know, we're not a city that we have an effective park and ride and that kind of thing in place. So we are going to be relying on people to come into the city to park, to visit, to work, to come and see our wonderful offer that we have and are going to be delivering in the next few years. So I think, Chair, that is something which I'd be very interested to explore more as to what that strategy is and where the perception is of the nearest car parks, whether something is going to be remodelled or built elsewhere, or whether we believe, rightly or wrongly, that there is enough car parking spaces that are either not properly utilised or not promoted nearby. But that's it's a huge concern for me.
Yeah, me too.
You know, where is the parking going to be?
I suppose the question is, does the operator of the arena have a view on where their customers are going to park?
Yeah.
Just going to say, Werner and Nigel would clearly have a view on this, so it's a shame. But I'm hearing this is something obviously to pick up that you're keen to explore in a.
Yeah.
Well, I just don't see why that, you know, say for instance, disabled people, what's going to happen with them? Speaking as one myself. Are we being thought about or being pushed into that too hard to do box?
No, I don't think it is. I think parking is an issue that obviously is often a source of debate within Derby. I think there are some things around at the moment that there is quite there is a provision of car parking in the city centre, and there is some work to do to understand how that movement is around the city centre and what the best places are for car parking in the city centre in order to serve all of the new facilities that are coming on board. So Beckett Well, Market Hall, the Marketplace, all of those developments that are coming on board. I think we need to give that some proper thought. But I think at the moment, the strategy here is to ensure that people have parking in the right places and that that people can move around the city effectively.
But disabled people can't move around the city effectively.
No, I get that, and that is an important consideration that we need to pick up, and it's certainly something that we've been having conversations with anyway, particularly as the demolition happens, the impact that will happen. I think that there are several things that we need to think about, but what I would say to you is we could by all means bring that back to this group, but it is something that we are thinking about as a strategic piece for the city centre.
I think that's the point. It needs thinking about strategically, and if you've got a 3,000 capacity venue, you're going to have a significant number of those people travelling in by car. And yes, we can encourage public transport, all the rest of it, but the reality is a significant proportion will be travelling from far afield.
Exactly, but I think, and part of that kind of strategic thought is how we make sure the parking's in the right place, to serve venues, but also that we ensure that there's movement, because what you don't want is 3,000 people leaving a venue, all going from one car park, and then that causes problems as well. So we've got to think about a real strategic thought to this across the city.
People will likely want to go for something to eat or a drink on the way, so.
And we encourage them to do that.
That does need to be part of the strategy. So a car park right next to a venue in a way might not encourage people to spend in the local economy. So a short walk away.
I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. And you're right, one car park there, 3,000 people leaving at the same time, nightmare. Yeah, wholeheartedly agree with you. But there is disabled people that need to park nearby. They've got no choice but to park nearby, and we should not forget them. Councillor Holmes.
So thank you, Chair. And I think I really think this needs to be, and I'm sure it is, joined up, obviously holistically across the city in terms of parking provision. But if we look at this logically, ASM Global, the officers need to be talking to them about parking and their expectations, because some of their shows are going to be extremely popular. They'll be sold out. It'll be a great venue. We know that, but it's going to be a large amount of cars coming into the city needing to park reasonably close to the Beckett Well area. Mm-hmm. Now, add this to the mix, that at the same time as the Beckett Well Arena is opening, we're closing off the car park, potentially. It's going to happen sooner rather than later, because you can't start demolishing the assembly rooms and keep the car park open. So that's going to coincide fairly well, I'd say, in the same kind of timeline. And so we're going to lose the car park that's nearest Beckett Well at the same time as Beckett Well opens with our flagship new arena. So I think there has to be a conversation with about that, whether the car park, whether there could be a bigger onus and support and a push to make sure that a car park can be delivered in and around the Beckett Well site that can then serve the marketplace, as an example. But I think we really do need a strategy, unless officers can convince us that it's all going to be fine. There's car parks here, within 3 minutes walking distance, that there's disabled parking facilities for those who need it, nearer the venues and nearer the marketplace, then but I'm just sceptical. I think that
let's bring something back. So we are in conversation with AFM. Obviously, they're developing their operational plan for Beckett Well at the moment. We're in a lot of conversations with them about all of these issues. And coach drop off and all of those things as well need to be considered. So that's part of our conversations with ASM. We are thinking very hard about car parking, and I suggest we bring something back.
But my point is, time is ticking. You've just told us that this is now finally moving forward, and the expectation is we're going to see, that assembly room site starting to be demolished by the end of the year. So that's not long. So, and then the new venue's opening in spring. So we've got to move quickly on this, because otherwise we could find ourselves in a serious situation where the visiting Derby's arena is a nightmare because you can't park anywhere or can't park close. That's what I'm saying.
So as Tammy said, we are talking to ASM about that. They are aware of our plans for the assembly room site. They're also Bold Lane car park is actually the closest in proximity, so that's obviously having improvement works at the moment. That's not.
Is that going to be increased in size?
There's no plans to increase.
So we're getting rid of how big is this Everett car park?
It's in how many is it? 300 and something spaces.
Detail of spaces.
So where are they going to go? Because
Yeah.
Bold Lane is a very busy car park. It's in the top 10 securest buildings in the world.
I'm trying to think of the nearest. The Blessed Carriage is the other one, isn't it? What's it called? The other one.
So there's Bold Lane, Chapel Street,
Street,
and
yeah.
obviously the Derby and Centre are the other multi-storey car parks, if you like, within the city. And as Tammy said,
Streets.
there's various surface car parks as well across the city centre. So obviously we're working with ASM to understand and to ensure they understand they know what the provision is and what our plans are, and then moving into that strategic piece that Tammy described around what the future looks like, both for moving people around the city effectively, dealing with obviously our environmental objectives as well. We want more sustainable travel, but we recognise that car parking is an important part of the mix, and we recognise that for disabled people as well, that's critical, isn't it?
It is absolutely critical.
Use of the city centre. So that.
Probably an element of underestimating actually how much car parking we have, and that's the thing, Chair. I think it'd be really good to understand that better, and because it's a big concern for me. I think that I'd like to learn a lot more about that as to how it's going to work, what officers' views are. Given the timeline, I think it is something we need to the next meeting. If that,
I think that's a very good idea.
Nobby Street's probably underused quite a lot at the moment. Yes.
Yeah, and it might be an education thing. It might be that fears can be allayed, but they need data.
From Abbey Street to here is quite a walk.
It's about experience as well, though, isn't it? It's about the experience. Well, you don't want people to say it's a nightmare to park and it took me 15 minutes and 20 minutes or I couldn't find my way there. You know what I mean? It's about experience, and we need it to be the best experience for people that are going to visit the city. It won't just be people from Derby that come to the arena, it'll be from the region. And we need to be welcoming, and we need to make sure people can park reasonably quickly closer to the venue, and have that really good experience in the city when they come to visit us.
Let's bring a joint piece away with that, because we live on this. They'll have all the technical numbers available.
Revenue for the council as well. We don't.
Exactly.
Well, with all due respect, we don't want to be giving money to private car parks. We want to be getting the revenue as a council car park. Not knocking them down and not getting the revenue. But anyway. Okay,
so indicative programme. So there's two parts to this really. As I've said before, we're looking to enter a development agreement with Vinci Ion once they have worked through these different stages of the project development. REBA stage 2, that refers to a particular level of stage of design. Stakeholder and public engagement obviously will be happening in parallel to ensure we engage and consult. And then proof of concept and outline business case, as I say, all of that is intended to reach conclusion by the end of the year. And I know you specifically asked about the timescales for delivery and construction. And what I've done here is outline typically what stages would need to then follow in order to reach the point where a start on site, we're prepared for that, and broadly how long those stages usually take. What we are in the process of doing within Vinci and Ion between now and the end of the year, within that outline business case, is to start to look at some of the more specific timelines associated with that. But we're not there yet, so we can't say construction is going to start on this particular date. So obviously we'll need to prepare. Vinci Ion will need to prepare a planning application, and that planning application will need to be considered and determined. In parallel, there'll need to be funding secured, both from private investment and potentially any public sector funding that's required to deliver, and then mobilisation to start on site. So they are very indicative, high level, typical lengths of time that you might see for those particular stages, but we haven't yet got timelines specified for delivery. And then just a quick slide on governance. Obviously, we've got the usual governance arrangements set up in terms of a project board, project teams, working groups with our partners as well, just to make sure we've got all of that governance piece covered off. And any specific development proposals for any of the sites that we've mentioned will be subject to further cabinet approval. So there'll be opportunity at that point, obviously, for further scrutiny as part of the cabinet process. And then the final couple of slides on financial implications. So you referenced earlier, Councillor Holmes, the demolition budget. So there was a budget, well, the original budget for demolition on the capital programme was 5.3 million. And there is 3.9 million of that budget remaining once we have, because we've obviously used 3.9, that's on the capital programme. Obviously, we've used the differences because we've been doing pre-demolition works, so it has been spent on the site. And the initial, I'm not in a position to reveal for commercially sensitive reasons, but what I can say is the initial cost plan we've received and are discussing with the contractor was within that budget envelope. So in terms of deliverability, obviously we've got to work through a final programme and cost plan and bring that back in the autumn, but it's within that cost envelope.
So demolition within that remaining budget?
Yes.
Well, really? Okay.
Yeah. And then in terms of redevelopment costs, obviously I keep saying this, don't I? The outline business case, that's where by that stage, Vinci Iron will have worked up high level construction costs. We don't have those yet, and then we'll need to work in collaboration with them to secure investment, both from private sector and potentially for public sector sources. And I guess the final point on this slide is that I think you'll be familiar with this story. In order to apply for funding, you need a certain level of information about the scheme. You need to have at least a REBA stage 2 design, reasonable certainty about its ability to secure planning consent, a business case in place. You can't apply for funding with a concept. You have to have a robust level of information sat behind that. So that's what we're working on now, and that's what will be used in due course to secure that funding.
Yeah, just in terms of the demolition, will that deliver a completely cleared site, or are there elements of the building that can be reused, for example? Or...
we won't be looking to reuse any elements of the building, and we're working, Vinci and I, on our part of that process to almost decide what the specification for the demolition is, so we all know exactly how the site will be left when the demolition is complete, so then they can obviously feed that into their plans for further redevelopment of the site.
It would be more or less the cleared
Yeah.
site.
Chair, if I was cabinet member, I'd be asking you multiple times or pressing, is this a fixed cost demolition, or is it an estimate with contingency? How are we playing this? Because I know that fixed costs would be more expensive than normal, but it gives you that ability to say that is it. We know that that's going to be the cost, and it won't exceed that. And if it does, it's not down. The council doesn't bear that cost. So which direction are the council currently going? It's a complex building. It's an old building. It has asbestos in it. It's a very tricky prospect, I would have thought, to demolish that in an area that is in the middle of the city.
So the complexities of the building absolutely is the reason why, firstly, the council have done work ourselves during 23 and 24 pre-demolition phase, so doing a level of survey work and understanding of the building and clearing out elements that we can and safeguarding the Vibrancy as well. And also the work that we're doing with the contractor now is taking weeks to make sure again that the cost plan, the programme and the methodology are all based on a really robust understanding of the building. In terms of the comment, I need to defer to property colleagues to say exactly what the contract type is that we're using, but to be a target cost with contingency approach rather than a fixed cost.
So that the assembly rooms is a notorious building in terms of escalating costs. I'm very worried about that, because we need to have very robust financial estimates in place to be confident that costs aren't going to escalate. It worries me greatly. I'd be looking towards a fixed cost, then you know it's going to be done and it will not spiral out of control.
Because these things have a habit of doing that, don't they?
Yeah.
I think what I would say is it's quite difficult to negotiate this fixed cost in the current market. So we need to bear that in mind, and we will take that away. What I would say about demolition is it's slightly different to construction. So construction is notoriously costs do accelerate because of the viability of materials sourcing and the availability of labour, which are the two things that are spiralling construction costs out of control at the moment, and why you get this constant thing where tender prices and escalation of costs is happening. Demolition, obviously, you're not buying materials, so that risk is mitigated to a certain extent. That's not to say that once you start demolition, something unexpected materialises. So all we can do at this stage is undertake as much survey work as we can to understand the state the building is, what the programme for demolition will be, how we'll tackle. And there are, as you say, it's a complex building. There's a lot of asbestos in there. There's a rack in there. There are other things that we need to take account of. So this survey work that we're taking at the moment will help hopefully give us the answers that we need and as much certainty as we can get before we start that demolition process. And just to be clear, we're already looking at some of the mitigation measures to keep that to minimise the risks on the demolition and what that looks like. There are things that we'll need to take account of now in how the building is demolished. And I think some people think demolition is a kind of wrecking ball comes in, not to think. You will actually find that once demolition starts, from the outside, it doesn't look like a lot's happening, but that's because a lot of the work will be going on inside to make sure that the building comes down safely, given its constrained position.
Will the contingency, it'd just be interesting to know what the options are there, just to see, I suppose to ask, what would the fixed cost be compared to what's been estimated through the alternative? Is the contingency, do you know what the percentage is? It's normally 5 to 10%, but on a potential, I know it's difficult, so it's a little bit more straightforward, I've thought, in terms of renovation of a grade 2 building or something like that, that you can. But is it 5 to 10%, or do we know where we are with the percentage of contingency? If we did go the non-fixed cost price,
I don't have that level of detail to hand. That's generally that's something that we can look into.
Because I always base it on, Chair, when you look at a report, I always go straight to the risk register and I look at the reds and I look at the ambers. This one for me would be red. So for me, I think we should be looking very closely at that to offer the support and advice if we can, to see if we can help steer things in the right direction to make sure we don't get caught out financially in terms of the overall cost, and get this demolished on time and on budget, which is always the aim.
So what we can do, we can take that away in terms of exploring the contractual arrangements, if you like, available to us, how the budget's built up for those different contractual options, and what contingency levels are represented in all. Cool. Okay, and then the final one on revenue. So this is purely about to the outline business case stage. Obviously, this doesn't go beyond into delivery of the actual scheme proposals. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the cost to outline business case for the redevelopment proposals in terms of the multidisciplinary professional team that I mentioned at the beginning, the scheme design, and preparing the outline business case. Vinci and Ion are funding their costs. And then the City Council has costs, for example, project management time in my team, and professional fees, because we need our own legal and commercial advisors as well to help in this whole negotiation process. And we've secured external funding through a historic business rates retention pilot programme to fund those. So those are the sources essentially of the funding for the revenue costs. So next steps, obviously, just to kind of draw all that together really, finalise preparation for demolition to start in the autumn, complete the REBA 2 design and the outline business case, and ultimately enter the development agreement with Vinci and Ion. And then I've just finished with the slide I started with, just in terms of what scrutiny board asked for, just as a bit of a reminder to check in and see if there's anything you expected to hear that we haven't covered, or any further questions. Thank you.
Well, my question, when, I can't remember the exact date when it burnt down to start with. When did it, when was it?
March 2014.
Oh, so 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. It's taken us 10 years to get to this stage.
Yeah.
I think it's quite sad, to be honest with you. You got anything up there, Councillor Holmes?
No, I think, thank you very much for bringing the report. This is something which, you know, it's no criticism of you guys. We have asked for this for the last 12 months or more, and this is finally the kind of detail that we actually wanted to be brought to us. So thank you for that. It really gives us information that we wanted, and we can positively, proactively now be engaged in the process. So the information that we've agreed to be brought back and updates would be very, very welcome for the next meeting if possible.
Yes.
And if we could take up the offer of the presentation from the developers, that's certainly welcome.
Well said, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. It was very interesting. It was just to say it's a shame that it's taken us over 10 years to get to start to knock it down. But we are where we are. Thank you very much. Right. Is there anything else?
Yeah. Good program.
That's actually as work programme. We got the work programme.
Item, the Derby Connect, it's due to come back.
We're about the next meeting.
Yeah.
And Chair, can I propose another area of work programme moving forward? I think for me it'd be useful to have a review and work on the climate and decarbonisation strategy and work programme of the council. Obviously moving forward towards net zero, both as a city and a country. So I think it's really important for us to know what the city council's strategy is and what the work that is ongoing to deliver that and deliver on its commitment to climate change emergency as well, or not the emergency anymore, is it? The crisis, I think it's called now. So yeah, Chair, if you're agreeable, just to have that as a work programme.
Yeah,
Yeah.
be very interesting.
Consider the council's current and future strategy / work programme to become a decarbonised city. I think that's pretty much what I'd say.
Well said.
Yeah.
Right, that's it. So with that, on that bombshell then, thank you all very much indeed.